My husband served me divorce papers at my own retirement party while my children cheered best day ever. That's when I learned what betrayal really looked like. I'm Barbara Palmer, and for 32 years I'd sorted mail at the Cleveland post office. 32 years I'd worked overtime to pay for their dreams, and tonight, in front of everyone who respected my work, my own family celebrated destroying me. My husband Richard thought he was taking half of nothing. My daughter Tasha believed she was watching a woman who embarrassed her finally get what she deserved. My son Kevin saw his chance to escape the shame of having a mother who wore a postal uniform to work. But here's what they didn't know. While they'd been planning my destruction, I'd been building an empire. I smiled, signed those papers, and opened my briefcase full of property deeds. Real quick, before I tell you what happened next, subscribe if you haven't already. I want to know where you're watching from, especially if you've ever been looked down on for honest work. If you've ever had family members ashamed of the job that fed them, clothed them, sent them to college. If you've ever been called just a postal worker by the people you sacrificed everything for. Let me back up, give you the whole picture. For 32 years I sorted mail at the Cleveland post office. Rain, snow, holidays, I kept the mail moving. I started at 4:00 a.m. most days, finished by noon, then went to my second job managing my rental properties. But somewhere along the way my family decided that made me a disappointment. It started small. Richard would introduce me at neighborhood gatherings as my wife Barbara. She works for the government. Never she's a postal worker or she's been with USPS for decades. Just works for the government. Like I pushed papers in some forgotten office. Like my blue uniform was something to hide. The kids picked up on it. Tasha, now 28 and fresh out of law school, learned early to be vague about my job. When her classmates' parents asked what I did, she'd say, "Mom's in federal service," never proud. Never specific, just federal service. Kevin was worse. At 25, with his business degree and corporate ambitions, he'd perfected the art of changing the subject when anyone asked about family. I overheard him once at a coffee shop with friends. "Your mom sounds amazing," one said about another guy's mother who owned a boutique. "What does your mom do, Kevin?" "Oh, she's between things right now." Between things. I'd worked the same job for 32 years, but it was the little moments that really showed me where I stood. Like when Tasha needed money for law school applications. $4,000 for fees, LSAT prep, everything. She asked me for it like I should be grateful she'd even considered me capable of having it. "Mom, I know you probably don't have this kind of money lying around, but I'd written the check without hesitation." That was 20 months ago. She'd never asked how I had it so easily available. Or when Kevin needed a co-signer for his business loan, the bank required someone with stable income and good credit. He came to me last after trying Richard's brother and 2 family friends first. "Mom, I hate to ask, but you're literally my only option." My only value was being the last resort. The worst part was watching Richard feed this narrative. At dinner parties with his colleagues from the insurance company, he'd laugh about my simple needs. "Barbara's not complicated," he'd say. "Give her her uniform and her coffee and she's fine." Like I was some kind of pet. He'd complain to his sister about my lack of ambition. I heard the phone calls. She could have gone back to school, become a postal inspector, made real money, but she was too comfortable just being a carrier. What he didn't know was that I'd been using that carrier income very carefully. While he spent money on golf memberships and took the kids to expensive restaurants, I'd been learning about real estate. While he bought new furniture and planned vacation trips, I'd been studying property values and rental markets. Every overtime shift, every holiday I worked while they stayed home warm and safe, that money had a purpose. My first property was a small duplex in Lakewood. Bought it in 2008 when the market crashed. $18,000 down, fixed it up myself on weekends. Within 6 months, I had reliable tenants paying me $1,400 a month, more than enough to cover the mortgage. But I never mentioned it. Richard would have found reasons we needed that money for other things. The kids would have seen it as proof they deserved more spending money. So I kept quiet, and I kept buying. Property 2 came in 2009, a single-family rental in Parma. Then, a triplex in Lakewood in 2011. A small apartment building in Cleveland Heights in 2013. Each one carefully selected, each one generating positive cash flow, each one completely invisible to my family. They saw me come home in my postal uniform, tired and smelling like the mail truck, and assumed that meant unsuccessful. They never wondered why I wasn't stressed about money. Never questioned how we always seemed to have what we needed, even on my supposedly limited salary. The disrespect became routine. Tasha would borrow $300 here, $600 there, always with the same tone, like she was doing me a favor by giving me the chance to help her. Kevin treated family dinners like charity work. He'd show up, eat his meal, and scroll through his phone. When I'd try to talk about work, about the people I met, the routes I knew by heart, he'd give me the same polite smile he'd give a stranger making small talk in an elevator. And Richard, he'd started looking at me like I was a problem that needed solving, like my presence in his life was holding him back from something better. I began staying late at the post office, volunteering for extra routes, not because the work required it, but because home felt like a courtroom where I was permanently on trial for the crime of being ordinary. But here's the thing about ordinary people. We notice things. We listen. We remember. And we plan. By the summer of last year, I could feel the marriage ending. Richard had started working out at LA Fitness. New clothes, new cologne, coming home energized in ways that had nothing to do with exercise equipment. The signs weren't subtle. Text messages he'd hide when I walked into the room. Phone calls he'd take outside in the garage. Suddenly needing to run errands that took 3 hours to complete. I could have confronted him, could have demanded to know what was happening. But I'd learned something over the years. Information is more valuable than confrontation. So I watched, I listened, I waited. The first concrete evidence came in August. A charge on our credit card for dinner at Blue Point Grill, the expensive seafood restaurant downtown. $112 for 2 people. Problem was, he told me he was working late that night. Working late at the insurance office doesn't usually involve $112 seafood dinners. Then came the gym membership upgrade. From a basic $25 a month plan to a premium $75 package that included personal training sessions with someone named Candace Ellis. I didn't need to be a detective to connect the dots, but the financial infidelity was just the beginning. Richard started talking about our future differently, suggestions about selling the house, maybe getting something smaller, comments about how we were carrying too much debt for people our age. That's when I realized what was happening. He wasn't just planning to leave, he was planning to take half of everything he thought we had. The irony was staggering. While he worried about our supposed debt, I was generating $15,000 a month in rental income. While he stressed about the mortgage on our house, I owned 10 other properties, 7 of them free and clear. While he feared we couldn't afford retirement, I had enough passive income to retire tomorrow. But if I stayed silent, if I let this play out the way he was planning, I'd lose everything I'd built. Ohio is a no-fault divorce state, which means the court doesn't care why marriages end. They just divide assets 50-50. The house we'd lived in for 22 years, half to him. My retirement account from 32 years of work, half to him. The savings account he thought was our only nest egg, half to him. Unless I could prove the properties were separate assets, bought with my income, titled in my name only, maintained with my labor, I called Patricia Morgan the best divorce attorney in Cleveland. We'd gone to high school together, stayed in touch over the years. She knew me. She knew my work ethic. Barbara, when did you buy the first property? 2008, the Lakewood duplex. And Richard knew about it. No, none of them. Not the properties, not the rental income, nothing. Patricia was quiet for a moment. You've been running a real estate business for 15 years and your husband doesn't know. He thought I was just working overtime at the post office. What about tax returns? Joint filing. I file separately. Have for years. Told him it was easier because of my federal employment. And the properties are titled, How, all in my name. Barbara Palmer. Not Barbara and Richard Palmer, just me. Patricia let out a low whistle. Barbara, do you realize what you've done? You've built a completely separate estate. If we can prove every dollar came from your individual earnings, Richard has no claim to any of it. That's what I'm hoping. More than hoping. We can document this. Pay stubs, deposit records, mortgage statements, everything in your name. This is airtight. The retirement party was scheduled for November 15th. The post office was throwing it at a nice venue, inviting my colleagues' management, even the regional supervisor. Richard had insisted on making it a family event. The kids should be there to celebrate you, he'd said. It's a big milestone. I'd agreed, not realizing he was planning to use my celebration as his stage. The party was lovely. My coworkers had put together a slideshow of photos from my 32 years of service. Me as a young woman in my first uniform. Me delivering mail in snowstorms. Me receiving commendations for perfect attendance. People gave speeches about my reliability, my work ethic, my kindness to everyone on my routes. Stories about how I'd noticed when elderly residents hadn't collected their mail and called for welfare checks. How I'd helped new carriers learn their routes. How I'd never missed a day, never complained, never let anyone down. My supervisor presented me with a plaque and a check for my accumulated leave time. $8, $400 for unused vacation and sick days. 32 years of barely taking time off, all paid out at once. The room applauded. I felt proud. For a moment, I felt seen. Then Richard stood up. I'd like to say a few words. He walked to the front of the room, smiling. Barbara and I have been married for 30 years. She's been a dedicated postal worker, a devoted mother, and he paused. It's time for a new chapter. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. Barbara, I'm sorry to do this here, but I think it's fitting. At the end of one journey, the beginning of another. He handed me the envelope. Divorce papers. The room went silent. People looked at each other, confused, uncomfortable. I opened the envelope. It was all there. Petition for dissolution of marriage, asset division, spousal support requests. Richard kept talking. I know this seems sudden, but Barbara and I have grown apart. She deserves someone who appreciates her simple lifestyle. And I deserve, he glanced at someone in the back of the room. I looked. Candace Ellis, young blonde wearing yoga pants like they were formal wear. I deserve to be happy. Then Tasha stood up. Honestly, this might be the best day ever. Kevin nodded, clapping. Finally, Dad deserves better than this. They were celebrating. My own children were celebrating my public humiliation at my retirement party. My coworkers looked horrified. My supervisor started to stand, probably to say something, but I held up my hand. It's fine, I said quietly. Really, it's fine. I looked at Richard. He was smiling, confident, probably imagining the settlement he thought he'd get. Half the house, half my retirement, half the savings. I looked at Tasha and Kevin. They were relieved. Finally, their embarrassing mother was going to be out of Dad's life. No more having to explain why Mom was just a postal worker. I reached under the table where I'd placed my briefcase earlier. The briefcase Richard had always made fun of. Why does a mail carrier need a briefcase, he'd joke. I set it on the table and opened it. Inside were 10 folders, each one labeled with a property address. Before I sign anything, I said, my voice calm and clear, I think there's something everyone should know. I pulled out the first folder. This is 1247 Lakewood Avenue. A duplex I bought in 2008 for $85,000. It's now worth $195,000. Generates $1,400 a month in rental income. Richard's smile faltered. I pulled out the second folder. This is 892 Parma Heights Road, single-family home, bought in 2009 for $110,000, worth $240,000 now, generates $1,600 a month. His face went pale. I continued through all 10 properties. Addresses, purchase prices, current values, monthly rental income. The room was completely silent now. Total portfolio value, I said, closing the last folder, $2.4 million. Monthly rental income, $15,000. All purchased with my postal worker salary, all titled in my name only. All completely separate from our marital assets. Richard looked like he'd been hit by a truck. That's not possible. You're a mail carrier. I am a mail carrier, and apparently I'm better with money than an insurance agent. Tasha's mouth was open. Mom, you have $2.4 million in real estate. I do. And you've spent the last 10 years telling people I was between things. Kevin stood up. Wait, so you're rich, I'm comfortable. Which is ironic since your father always said I was too comfortable being just an employee. My supervisor started laughing. Then other coworkers joined in. The applause that followed wasn't polite, it was thunderous. Richard tried to recover. Those are marital assets, bought during the marriage. I'm entitled to half. Actually, I said, pulling out one more document, you're not. I spoke with my attorney. Every property was purchased with funds from my individual income, titled in my name alone, maintained with my labor. Ohio law is very clear about separate property. I slid the divorce papers across the table. I'll sign these. Gladly. You want half of our marital assets, fine. Half of the house equity is $24,000. Half of our joint savings is $3,800. Half of the 2019 Toyota Camry. Take it all. But my properties. Those stay mine. Candace, the yoga instructor in the back, looked like she wanted to disappear through the floor. Richard's brother, who'd come to the party, spoke up. Rich, did you know about any of this? Of course not. She hid it from me. I didn't hide it, I corrected. I just didn't advertise it to people who were ashamed of my work. You told your sister I lacked ambition. Your daughter told her law school friends I was between things. Your son pretended I didn't exist at business networking events. Why would I share my success with people who viewed me as a failure? My coworker Susan, who'd been my root partner for 15 years, stood up. Barbara, you've been managing 10 properties while working full-time at the post office and raising 2 children and maintaining a house and apparently being too simple and unambitious. Another coworker asked, why didn't you ever tell us? Because you respected me for my work, not my wealth. That's the kind of respect that matters. Richard tried one more time. Barbara, we've been married 30 years. Surely some of that belongs to me. Richard, you've been cheating on me for at least 8 months with Candace Ellis. You planned this humiliation at my retirement party. You encouraged our children to disrespect me. And you thought I had nothing, so taking half of nothing seemed like a fine consolation prize before you started your new life. I stood up, gathering my folders. You underestimated the quiet postal worker. That was your mistake. I looked at Tasha and Kevin. As for you two, you celebrated this. You called today the best day ever. So I hope you meant it, because from now on you're adults who made their feelings very clear. Tasha's face changed. Mom, wait. We didn't know. You didn't know I had money. That's the only thing you didn't know. You knew you were ashamed of me. You knew you lied about my job. You knew you came to me last for help. The money doesn't change any of that. It just makes it more expensive for you. I signed the divorce papers right there. Send the final settlement to my attorney, Patricia Morgan. She has all the property documentation. As I walked out of that venue, my coworkers stood and applauded again. Real applause. The kind that comes from respect. Behind me, I heard Richard trying to explain to Candace. I thought she was just a mail carrier. I had no idea you thought I was just a mail carrier, Candace said, her voice cold. Sounds like you have a pattern of underestimating women. I heard her heels clicking toward the exit. Apparently, dating a soon-to-be divorced man with no money wasn't as appealing as dating someone she thought had assets. The next few weeks were swift. Patricia filed the response to Richard's divorce petition, including complete documentation of all 10 properties. Richard's attorney tried to argue community property. These were purchased during the marriage with marital funds. Patricia shut it down. Mrs. Palmer's income from the United States Postal Service is clearly documented. Every down payment, every mortgage payment, every repair came from her paychecks. Mr. Palmer contributed nothing. He didn't know the properties existed. He never provided labor or funds. Under Ohio law, these are separate assets. We had bank statements showing my postal salary deposits going into my personal account, mortgage payments coming from that same account, property tax payments, repair receipts, everything in my name paid with my money. Richard's attorney pushed harder. Mr. Palmer's income supported the household, allowing Mrs. Palmer to invest her earnings. Mr. Palmer's income supported Mr. Palmer's golf memberships and expensive dinners, Patricia countered. Mrs. Palmer worked overtime holidays and night shifts to generate the capital for her investments while also contributing to household expenses. The financial records are clear. The mediator reviewed everything: bank statements, pay stubs, property records, tax returns. These are clearly separate assets, she said finally. Mrs. Palmer can demonstrate that every dollar came from her individual labor. Mr. Palmer has no claim. Richard sat across the table looking like someone had stolen his future, which in a way someone had. He'd stolen his own future by underestimating his wife for 30 years. The final divorce settlement was signed in December. Richard received his half of the house equity, $24,000, after closing costs. He also got half of our joint savings, $3,800, and the 2019 Toyota Camry. Total settlement, $27,800. He moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Brook Park. Candace Ellis, the yoga instructor, ended their relationship 3 weeks after the property revelations. Apparently, dating a divorced insurance agent living in Brook Park wasn't the upgrade she'd imagined. The social consequences were immediate and brutal. Our neighborhood, where Richard had spent years positioning himself as the successful one, married to the simple postal worker, suddenly understood the truth. He'd left a millionaire for a yoga instructor who made $32,000 a year. He'd dismissed his wife's blue-collar work while she was quietly building wealth. Richard always talked about Barbara's lack of vision, our neighbor Susan told me at the grocery store. Turns out he was the one who couldn't see what was right in front of him. Richard's sister stopped speaking to him. His brother asked me if I needed any help with property management, since he had experience. The narrative Richard had built about being held back by his unambitious wife crumbled when everyone realized he'd been living off her ambition the entire time. Meanwhile, Tasha's financial reality hit hard. Law school debt was crushing her. $180, 0 inches, student loans. She'd been counting on family support that no longer existed. Her first call came 5 days after the divorce was finalized. "Mom, I need to talk to you." "About what?" "About my loans." "About money. The payments start in February. $2,100 a month. That's a lot." "Mom, I know I messed up. I know what I said at the party was terrible, but I'm drowning here. I can't afford these payments on a junior associate salary." "Tasha, what do you want from me?" "I want to borrow $50,000 to pay down the principal. It would cut my monthly payment almost in half." "Borrow implies you plan to pay it back. When would that happen?" "After I make partner. After I'm established. Maybe 8 years." I let the silence stretch. "Mom, are you still there?" "I'm here. Just thinking about something you said at the retirement party. What you said divorcing your father might be the best day ever." "Mom, I explained that. I was confused. I thought you and Dad were unhappy. I thought, Tasha, you celebrated your parents' divorce in public at my retirement party. You thought it was funny that I spent 32 years as a postal worker. You told your law school friends I was between things. I was young. I was stupid. You were 26. That's not young. That's a law school graduate who passed the bar exam. Mom, please. I'll pay interest. Whatever you want. What I want is a daughter who respects me. What I have is a daughter who wants my money now that she knows it exists. It's not about the money. Tasha, it's entirely about the money. A year ago, you couldn't mention my job without embarrassment. Today, you're asking me for $50,000. What changed? I changed. We all changed. No, you didn't change. Your circumstances changed. There's a difference. Mom, if I don't get help, I might have to leave the law firm. The debt is too much. Then leave. Find a job you can afford with the debt you chose to take on. That's not fair. Fair. You celebrated my humiliation at a retirement party. You think fair is relevant now." She hung up. Kevin's crisis came 2 weeks later. His startup business plan was falling apart. He'd quit his corporate job 6 months earlier to launch a consulting firm. But without capital, without clients, without a safety net, he was hemorrhaging money. "Mom, I made a mistake leaving my job." "What kind of mistake?" "A huge one. I thought I could make it work, but I'm burning through savings. I'm 3 months behind on rent. I maxed out 2 credit cards. I'm drowning." "What do you need?" $40,000 to cover my debts and give me 6 months of runway to build the business properly." "Kevin, what makes you think your business is my responsibility?" "Because you're my mother. Being your mother didn't stop you from being embarrassed by my work. I was immature. I didn't understand. You were 23 when you told your friends I was between things. That's not immature. That's a college graduate with a business degree." "Mom, please. I'll pay you back. I'll sign a contract. Whatever you need." What I need is a son who values me. What I have is a son who values my wallet. This is different. How? Because I'm asking for help, not a handout. Kevin, 18 months ago you needed a loan cosigner. You went to your uncle, first to family friends, then me. I was your last option. Do you remember what you said, Silence? You said I was literally your only option, that I was the last resort. Now you want $40,000. Why would I give it to someone who sees me as a backup plan? Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. But don't punish me forever for being young and stupid. I'm not punishing you. I'm just not rescuing you. There's a difference. He hung up too. The third call came from Richard himself in January. His voice was different, smaller, defeated. Barbara, we need to talk. No, we don't. The kids are struggling financially. The kids are adults. Tasha might have to defer her loans, go into forbearance. That's her decision to make. Kevin's business is failing. He's moving back in with me to save money. Then you'll have company in your one-bedroom apartment. Barbara, please. I know I made mistakes, but don't punish the children for my choices. Richard, I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just not rescuing anyone either. They're your children. They're adults who made their feelings about me very clear. They celebrated our divorce. They were embarrassed by my career for years. The fact that they're struggling now doesn't erase any of that. They were protecting me. They thought I was unhappy. Were you unhappy? Yes. Then you got what you wanted. Everyone got what they wanted. Barbara, I realize now that I made a mistake. A huge mistake. I laughed. Actually laughed. You realize that after you saw the property portfolio. That's not true. Richard, you filed for divorce after 8 months of cheating with Candace. You served me papers at my retirement party. You weren't realizing anything. You were caught. He tried a different approach. What if we went to counseling? What if we tried to work things out? Richard, we're divorced. You can't work out a divorce. We could remarry eventually. Start over. The audacity was staggering. You want to remarry me for my money. I want to remarry you because I made a mistake. You made a mistake in underestimating me. That's the only mistake you're acknowledging. Barbara, please. The kids need help. The kids need to understand that actions have consequences. They chose their side. They celebrated my humiliation. Now they live with it. You're being cruel. No, Richard. I'm being clear. For 30 years, I accepted being dismissed, diminished, and disrespected. I'm done accepting that. The kids want help. They can work for it like I did. You had opportunities they don't have. I had a postal job you were ashamed of. I had overtime shifts I worked while you played golf. I had a vision you called lack of ambition. They have the same opportunities I had. They just don't want to work as hard. By March, both Tasha and Kevin were working retail jobs to pay their bills. Tasha took a position at Nordstrom to supplement her junior associate salary. Kevin moved back to Richard's apartment and got a job at Target while trying to salvage his business. The family that had celebrated my failure was learning what actual failure looked like, and I was finally at peace. 6 months after the divorce, I was sitting on the back deck of my house, the house I'd paid for with my postal salary, reviewing rental income statements. $15, $200, had been deposited into my business account that morning, same amount as every month for the past 4 years. My phone rang. Tasha. Mom, can I come over? I want to talk to you. About what? About understanding. An hour later, she knocked on my front door. She looked different, older, tired. The law school confidence had been replaced with something more realistic. Mom, I got a second job. Nordstrom, 20 hours a week on top of the firm. That's a lot of hours. It is. But I need it. The loan payments are crushing me. I nodded but said nothing. And you know what I realized? The people at Nordstrom respect me more than anyone at the law firm. They respect that I'm willing to work 2 jobs. They respect the hustle. People respect what they understand. Tasha looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. Mom, I want to earn your respect back. Not your money, your respect. How, I don't know yet. But I'm going to figure it out. I spent 10 years being ashamed of you working a blue-collar job. Now I'm working retail myself, and I finally understand what you did. You worked, you saved, you built something, and I treated you like you were nothing. You treated me like I was embarrassing. I know. And I was wrong. So wrong. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking for a chance to prove I've learned. I was quiet for a moment. What did you learn? That respect isn't something you inherit from your parents' success. It's something you earn through your own work. That a job title doesn't make you valuable. Your character does. Those are good lessons. Mom, I'm sorry. For everything. For the party. For the lies about your job. For making you feel like you weren't enough. You were always enough. I was the one who wasn't. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. Tasha, I appreciate you saying that. Can I come by sometimes? Not for money. Just to talk, I'd like that. After she left, I sat on the deck for a long time. The apology had felt real. Not performative. Not manipulative. Real. 3 weeks later, Kevin called. Mom, I'm working at Target, 35 hours a week, $14 an hour. How's it going? It's humbling. Really humbling. My old business school classmates come in sometimes. They see me in the red shirt and I can tell what they're thinking. What are they thinking? That I failed. That I'm a disappointment. And how does that feel? Terrible, but also clarifying. Because that's exactly how I made you feel for years, isn't it? Like you failed because you wore a postal uniform. Yes. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I was a snob. I was ashamed of the woman who sacrificed everything for me, and now I'm living the life I looked down on, and I finally get it. Get what? That there's dignity in honest work. That a job doesn't define your worth. That you were never the embarrassment. I was. His voice cracked. Mom, I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for anything except maybe eventually another chance. A chance to be the son you deserved. Kevin, you can have that chance. But it has to be earned, not given. I know. And I'm going to earn it. After he hung up, I realized something. The revenge I'd imagined, the satisfaction of watching them struggle, it didn't feel as good as I thought it would. What felt better was watching them learn. Watching them understand. Watching them become people who valued work, who understood sacrifice, who respected others, regardless of their job titles. 2 months later, Kevin made a decision that surprised everyone. He enrolled in a trade program. Mom, I'm going to become an electrician. An electrician. Yeah, I want to learn a skill. Something real. Something useful. I'm tired of consulting and business plans and trying to get rich quick. I want to work with my hands. I want to build something. That's a good career. Solid, I know. And Mom, I'm doing it because you showed me that blue-collar work isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. He graduated from the program 8 months later and got hired by Cleveland Electric. Today, he makes $72,000 a year and loves it. Tasha stuck with the law firm in Nordstrom for 18 months. She paid down enough of her debt that the monthly payments became manageable. Then she made a change. Mom, I'm leaving corporate law. Where are you going, legal aid? Public defense. The pay is less, but there's a loan forgiveness program for public service, and honestly, the work feels more meaningful. That's wonderful, Tasha. I'm doing it because you showed me that money isn't everything, that helping people matters more than impressing people. 8 months after that conversation, Tasha came to my house with news. Mom, I met someone. His name is Marcus. He's a teacher. A teacher, yeah. 4th grade. He makes $48,000 a year, and he's the most genuine person I've ever met. He doesn't care that I have debt. He doesn't care that I work 2 jobs. He respects me. That's what matters. I told him about you. About everything. About how I treated you. He said anyone who could overcome what you overcame and still open the door when I knocked, that's someone he wants to meet. I met Marcus 2 weeks later. He was kind, authentic, and when he talked about his students, his whole face lit up. Mrs. Palmer, Tasha told me you worked for the Postal Service for 2 years. I did. My mom was a postal worker too. In Detroit. 28 years. She's my hero. I liked him immediately. As for Richard, his story was less redemptive. He stayed in the 1-bedroom apartment in Brook Park. His insurance job provided stability but not much else. He tried dating, but word had spread about what he'd done. The man who divorced his millionaire wife at her retirement party wasn't exactly a catch. His sister reached out to me once. Barbara, Richard is depressed. He realizes what he lost. He lost what he threw away. Can you find it in your heart to forgive him? I already have. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. He made his choices. Now he lives with them. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I sold the house Richard and I had shared too many memories there. I bought a beautiful condo overlooking Lake Erie, with a view that made me smile every morning. I expanded my property portfolio to 12 rentals. I hired a property management company to handle the day-to-day operations so I could actually enjoy retirement. I traveled. Spain, where I'd always wanted to go. The Caribbean. National parks across the United States. Places I'd put off for 30 years because there was always someone else's dream to fund. I started a mentorship program at the post office teaching younger workers about financial literacy and real estate investment. You don't need a fancy job to build wealth, I told them. You need discipline, vision, and patience. I did it on a postal salary. You can too. One young woman, 24 years old, came to me after a session. Miss Palmer, my family thinks I'm wasting my potential working here. They want me to go back to school, get a corporate job. What do you want? I like this job. I like the routine, the benefits, the stability, but I feel like I'm disappointing everyone. I looked at her carefully. Can I tell you something? She nodded. For 30 years my family thought I was wasting my potential too. My husband told people I lacked ambition. My kids were embarrassed to tell their friends what I did. But while they were judging me, I was building a $2.4 million real estate portfolio. Her eyes widened. On a postal salary. The job they were ashamed of gave me the stability to invest. The overtime they resented gave me the capital to buy properties. The work they dismissed as simple made me a millionaire. How did you do it? I lived below my means. I educated myself about real estate. I bought when others were afraid. I held when others sold. And I never ever let anyone make me feel small for doing honest work. She was quiet for a moment. Did your family ever apologize, eventually? After they saw what I'd built, after they needed help and realized I had the resources they'd mocked, did you help them? I helped them learn. I didn't rescue them. There's a difference. That conversation led to me starting a workshop series. Once a month I taught postal workers about real estate, investing, financial planning, building wealth on a working-class income. The attendance grew from 8 people to 40, then to 75. People were hungry for the information, for the permission to dream bigger than their job titles suggested they should. One man, 45 years old, approached me after a session. Miss Palmer, I've been with the post office for 20 years. My wife keeps pushing me to look for something better, something that sounds more impressive at dinner parties. What do you want? I like my job. I like my pension. I like my benefits. But I feel like I'm letting her down by not being more ambitious. Are you happy? At work, yes. At home, I'm made to feel like I'm not enough. I recognize that feeling. Let me ask you something. Does your job provide for your family? Yes. Does it give you stability? Yes. Does it align with your values and allow you to live the life you want? Yes. Then the problem isn't your job. The problem is someone else's expectations. He nodded slowly. My wife's friends all have husbands who are doctors, lawyers, executives. She feels like she married down. That's her issue to work through, not yours to fix by becoming someone you're not. 6 months later, he came back to tell me he'd had an honest conversation with his wife. They'd gone to counseling. She'd realized her own insecurities were driving her need for status. They were working on it. Your story gave me the courage to stand up for myself, he said. To say that I'm valuable as I am. Stories like that made the workshops worthwhile. A year after the divorce, the local news did a feature on my mentorship program, Postal Worker Builds $1 Million Empire While Serving Community. The segment aired on a Tuesday evening. My phone started ringing immediately. Former neighbors calling to say, congratulations. Old friends I hadn't heard from in years reaching out. Even some of Richard's relatives called to apologize for how they'd treated me. But the call that mattered most came from Tasha. Mom, I just watched the news segment. I'm so proud of you. Thank you, honey. I was thinking, would it be okay if I came to one of your workshops? I want to learn, really learn. Not just about real estate, but about how you did it. The discipline, the vision, all of it. You're welcome anytime. She came to the next workshop, sitting in the back, taking notes like a law student. Afterwards, she stayed to help me clean up. Mom, watching you teach, seeing how those people look at you with respect and admiration, I realized something. What? You were always worthy of that respect. I just couldn't see it because I was too busy being ashamed. The problem was never you. It was me. You were young. I was old enough to know better, but I'm learning now. Better late than never, right? Kevin started coming to the workshops too. He'd bring questions about investment strategies, property management, building passive income while working full-time. Mom, I want to do what you did. Not to get rich quick, but to build something sustainable. Something that lasts. It takes patience. I'm learning patience. Working at Cleveland Electric taught me that. You don't rush a job. You do it right, even if it takes longer. Watching my children transform, watching them understand and appreciate the path I'd walked, brought a satisfaction I hadn't expected. One evening, both Tasha and Kevin came over for dinner. The first family dinner we'd had since the divorce. We cooked together. We talked about their jobs, their goals, their lives. No one was on their phone. No one was distracted. They were present. Mom, Tasha said, over dessert, Marcus and I are getting engaged. That's wonderful. And I want you to know, when people ask what my mom does, I'm going to tell them the truth. You retired after 32 years with the Postal Service, and you built a real estate portfolio that changed your life. I'm going to tell them you're my hero. Kevin nodded. Same here. When my coworkers ask about family, I tell them my mom is the smartest investor I know, that she taught me everything about building wealth, that she's the reason I'm not embarrassed to work with my hands. I felt tears in my eyes. That means more to me than any amount of money. We know, Tasha said. And we're sorry it took us so long to understand. Later that night, after they'd left, I sat on my balcony overlooking Lake Erie. The water was calm, reflecting the city lights like scattered diamonds. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. I saw the news segment. You've done incredibly well. I'm sorry I never saw it while we were married. I'm sorry I never valued you the way I should have. You deserved better. You always deserved better. I read it twice. Then I replied, Thank you for saying that. I hope you've found peace. I meant it. The anger was gone. The hurt had faded. What remained was a sense of completion, of justice. Not the vengeful kind, but the kind that comes from living well. Richard had thought he was taking half of nothing. Instead, he'd walked away with $27,800, while I kept $2.4 million. But the real victory wasn't the money. It was the respect. From my children, from my community, from myself. For 32 years I'd sorted mail, I'd worked overtime, I'd sacrificed, and my family had been ashamed. Now they understood. The uniform I wore wasn't a symbol of failure. It was the foundation of success. The job they'd dismissed had given me financial freedom. The work they'd mocked had made me a millionaire. The path they'd scorned had led to security, independence, and peace. 2 years after the divorce, I received an unexpected visitor. Richard's mother, Eleanor, knocked on my condo door on a Sunday afternoon. Eleanor had never liked me. For 30 years, she'd made it clear I wasn't good enough for her son. Too common, too simple, just a postal worker. Eleanor, I said, surprised. What brings you here? May I come in? I stepped aside. She walked into my condo, taking in the view, the furnishings, the evidence of success she'd never expected from me. You've done well, she said, and it sounded like the words hurt. Thank you. She sat down, perched on the edge of my sofa like she might catch something from getting too comfortable. I came to talk about Richard. What about him? He's struggling. Financially, emotionally. He made a terrible mistake divorcing you, and now he's paying for it. Eleanor, that's not my problem. He's my son, and those are my grandchildren struggling too. Tasha working 2 jobs. Kevin's starting over in a trade. They're not struggling. They're learning. There's a difference. Learning what their father destroyed the family. Learning that respect and hard work matter more than appearances. Learning that a job title doesn't define your worth. Learning lessons I tried to teach them for years while you and Richard taught them the opposite. Eleanor's face flushed. You never what looked down on me, made comments about my lack of refinement, suggested. Richard could have married better, she was quiet. Eleanor, for 30 years you treated me like I was beneath your family. You introduced me to your friends as Richard's wife, who worked for the government, never specifying what I did because postal work wasn't prestigious enough. You bought the grandchildren expensive gifts and made comments about how I couldn't afford such things. I was trying to help. You were trying to remind me of my place. And you succeeded. I felt small in your presence for decades. You didn't realize I was building wealth, or you didn't realize how your condescension hurt. Eleanor looked down at her hands. Both, perhaps. Why are you really here? Because Richard asked me to talk to you. To see if there was any chance of reconciliation. I almost laughed. Reconciliation. He served me divorce papers at my retirement party in front of everyone I worked with. He humiliated me publicly because he thought I had nothing worth taking. He made a mistake. He made a choice. A calculated choice. He was cheating with Candace for months. He planned that public display. The only mistake was underestimating me. He's sorry. He's sorry he's poor. That's different than being sorry for how he treated me. Eleanor tried another approach. What about the children? They're learning who they are without my money propping them up. Tasha works retail while building her legal career in public service. She's learning the value of hard work, something she never understood when everything came easy. Kevin is an electrician making $72,000 a year, doing honest work he loves. He's learning a skilled trade, something your family looked down on for years. Eleanor, you sat at my table for 30 years and made comments about how manual labor was for people without options, how education meant transcending working-class roots. You and Richard created the environment where our children learned to be ashamed of regular work. She was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, you're right. I hadn't expected that. I was a snob, she continued. Richard was a snob. We raised him to value status over character, and we treated you accordingly. I'm sorry for that. The apology felt genuine. Thank you for saying that. But Barbara, he really is struggling. Not just financially, he's depressed. He barely leaves his apartment. He realizes what he lost. What he lost was his choice to lose. I know. But is there no room for forgiveness, for second chances? I've forgiven him. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It means accepting what happened and moving forward. So there's no chance, none. Richard chose to end our marriage. He doesn't get to change his mind because the consequences weren't what he expected. Eleanor stood to leave. At the door, she turned back. For what it's worth, I was wrong about you. You were always good enough. Better than good enough. My son was the lucky one, and he was too blind to see it. After she left, I thought about the conversation. Eleanor's apology had meant something, but it didn't change anything. Richard had made his bed. Now he had to sleep in it. 3 months later, I was featured in a national personal finance magazine. The postal worker who built a real estate empire, how Barbara Palmer turned a blue-collar job into millions. The article detailed my strategy, my discipline, my 32-year journey from single property to portfolio. It included interviews with some of my mentees, with Tasha and Kevin, with former co-workers. Richard was mentioned too. The husband who divorced her at her retirement party, not knowing she had $2.4 million in assets he could never touch. The article went viral. Thousands of people shared it online. I received hundreds of emails from working-class people inspired by the story. I'm a teacher, and my family thinks I'm wasting my potential. I'm a mechanic, and my wife's parents look down on me. I drive a truck, and my kids are embarrassed to tell their friends. I responded to as many as I could. Your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. Build your life. Build your wealth. And when they finally see what you've created, they'll claim they always believed in you. But you'll know the truth. The publicity led to speaking opportunities. Community colleges, workforce development programs, financial literacy organizations. I spoke about building wealth on a working-class income, about ignoring status seekers, about valuing yourself when others don't. At one event, a young woman asked, "How did you stay motivated when your own family was ashamed of you?" I didn't do it for motivation. I did it for security. I knew I couldn't count on anyone else, so I built something for myself. The motivation came from knowing I'd be okay no matter what happened. Another person asked, "Do you regret not telling your husband about the properties? Could you have avoided the divorce?" No. The divorce was inevitable. Richard didn't love me. He loved the idea of someone he could look down on. If I'd told him about the properties, he would have found other ways to diminish me. The money wasn't the problem. His character was. After the speaking events, people would line up to thank me, to tell me their stories, to say they'd gone home and opened investment accounts, researched real estate, started building their own futures. "You made me realize I don't need permission to be successful," one man said. "I don't need anyone's approval. I just need discipline and vision." That's when I realized the real value of what I'd built. It wasn't just the properties or the income, it was the example, the proof that ordinary people doing ordinary work can build extraordinary lives. 4 years after the divorce, Tasha got married. She and Marcus had a small ceremony in a garden, intimate and genuine. At the reception, Tasha gave a speech. "My mom taught me the most important lesson of my life, and I'm ashamed it took me so long to learn it. She taught me that dignity comes from how you treat people, not from what title you hold. That wealth comes from discipline, not luck. That respect is earned through character, not through status." She looked directly at me. "Mom, you are the strongest person I know. You worked for 32 years at a job we were ashamed of, and you used it to build an empire. You were humiliated at your retirement party, and you responded with grace and power. You taught us by example that quiet strength is real strength. I'm honored to be your daughter." Kevin stood up next. "I have something to add. Mom, I spent years embarrassed that you wore a postal uniform. I told people you were between things because I couldn't admit you had a job I thought was beneath me." He paused, emotion in his voice. "Then I lost everything. My business failed, my savings evaporated. I had to start over working retail, and you know what I learned? That the people who treated me with the most respect were the ones doing the jobs I used to look down on. The stalkers, the cashiers, the janitors. They understood what it meant to work hard for every dollar. Now I'm an electrician, and I'm proud of it. I work with my hands. I solve problems. I help people. And when someone asks what my mom does, I tell them she's retired after 32 years with the Postal Service, and she's a brilliant real estate investor. I tell them she's my hero." I couldn't hold back the tears. Marcus stood up. "I never met Barbara during the years her family was ashamed of her, but I've heard the stories, and I want to say something to everyone here. My mother was a postal worker too. She raised 3 kids on that salary. She put us all through college. She taught us that there's no shame in honest work." He looked at me. "Barbara, when Tasha told me about you, about what you built, about how your family treated you, I knew immediately what kind of woman you were. You're like my mother. Strong, determined, underestimated. Thank you for raising a daughter who eventually learned to see what I saw immediately. You're remarkable." The applause that followed was genuine and warm. These were people who understood, who valued character over status. After the wedding, I drove home, feeling a completeness I hadn't felt in years. My children had learned. They'd grown. They'd become people I was proud of. 6 months later, Kevin came to me with news. "Mom, I bought a property." "You did. A small duplex in Lakewood, same neighborhood as your first one. I saved for 3 years. I'm going to fix it up myself on weekends, just like you did." Pride swelled in my chest. "That's wonderful. I used everything you taught me in the workshops. I researched the area, ran the numbers, made sure the rent would cover the mortgage with room for profit. Mom, I want to build what you built. Not to get rich, but to have security. To know I'll be okay no matter what happens. You're going to do great. I hope so. And Mom, thank you for teaching me, for showing me it's possible, for not giving up on me even when I didn't deserve your help." Tasha called a week later. "Mom, Marcus and I are buying a house. Not anything fancy, just a small place in Lakewood. But it's ours. We're going to build equity instead of paying rent. That's smart. I learned from the best. And Mom, I've been working with some of my legal aid clients on housing issues. Predatory lending, eviction defense, tenant rights. Your workshops taught me so much about real estate that I can actually help these families navigate the system. That's exactly what that knowledge is for. To help people. I'm going to start teaching financial literacy workshops at the legal aid office for our clients, teaching them what you taught me, that wealth isn't about how much you make, it's about what you do with what you have. These conversations filled me with purpose. The empire I'd built wasn't just properties, it was knowledge passed down, lessons learned, a legacy that would outlast me. 8 years after the divorce, Richard reached out one final time, not asking for reconciliation, not asking for money, just asking for closure. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. He looked older, grayer. The confidence he'd worn like armor for 30 years was gone. "Barbara, I'm not here to ask for anything. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Okay. I've been in therapy for 2 years, working through why I treated you the way I did, why I needed to feel superior, why I diminished you, and what did you learn? That I was insecure, that your strength threatened me, that instead of admiring what you were building, I tore you down to feel better about myself. That's good that you understand that. I threw away 30 years with an incredible woman because I was too proud to see what was right in front of me. You were always the strong one, the smart one. I was just too intimidated to admit it. Richard, I appreciate the apology. I do, but it doesn't change anything. I know, I'm not asking it to. I just needed you to know that I finally see the truth. You were never the problem. I was." We talked for another hour. About the kids, about their growth, about how they'd both learned from hitting rock bottom. "They're good people now," Richard said. "Tasha's doing meaningful work. Kevin's building a life with his hands and his head. They're better people than I taught them to be. They learned hard lessons, but they learned because you let them. You could have rescued them. Instead, you taught them. That's what parents are supposed to do." As I drove home from that meeting, I realized I'd finally let go of all the anger. Richard had been a chapter in my life, but he wasn't the whole story. The story was about a woman who refused to be defined by other people's limitations, who worked a job others looked down on and built an empire, who was dismissed, disrespected, and humiliated but never defeated. I was 65 now. 8 years past the retirement party, where my world had split open. 8 years into a life I'd built entirely on my own terms. My property portfolio had grown to 15 rentals. My monthly income was $18,500. My net worth had passed $3 million. But the numbers weren't what mattered most. What mattered was the peace, the respect, the knowledge that I'd stood up for myself when it counted. What mattered was watching my children become people of character, seeing them value hard work, hearing them tell others about their mother with pride instead of shame. What mattered was the emails from strangers. "Your story changed my life." I stopped apologizing for my job. I started investing. I stood up to people who looked down on me. 10 years after that retirement party, I was standing in front of 200 people at a financial literacy conference in Columbus. The moderator was introducing me. Barbara Palmer worked for 32 years as a postal worker in Cleveland. While her family was ashamed of her blue-collar job, she quietly built a real estate portfolio now worth over $3 million. Please welcome Barbara Palmer. The applause was immediate and sustained. I walked to the podium, feeling a gratitude I couldn't fully express. "Thank you for being here," I began. "I want to tell you about the moment I knew I'd be okay." The room quieted. It wasn't when I bought my first property. It wasn't when I signed the divorce papers. It wasn't even when I opened that briefcase full of deeds at my retirement party. It was 6 months after the divorce when my daughter called to apologize. Not because she wanted money, but because she'd learned. She'd worked retail and experienced what it felt like to be judged for your job. She understood finally what I'd felt for 30 years. That's when I knew the real victory wasn't the money. It was the lesson, the transformation, the understanding that came from lived experience. I talked for 45 minutes about discipline, about ignoring critics, about building wealth slowly while others chase status, about the power of quiet consistency. When I finished, the standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. People lined up afterward not just to thank me but to share their stories. A woman in her 50 seconds, tears in her eyes. "I'm a janitor. My kids are embarrassed. Your story gives me hope that someday they'll see what I'm building. A young man in his 22nd. I almost quit my warehouse job because my girlfriend said it wasn't good enough. Now I'm staying. I'm investing. I'm building. An older man. I worked sanitation for 35 years. My son wouldn't tell his friends what I did. Last month he apologized, said he finally understood. Your story helped me forgive him. These conversations reminded me why I kept telling my story. Not for attention. Not for validation. But because someone out there needed to hear that they weren't alone, that their worth wasn't defined by their job title, that quiet people building quiet empires were all around if you knew where to look. That evening I had dinner with Tasha, Kevin, and their families. Tasha and Marcus had 2 kids now, both under 5. Kevin was engaged to a woman named Simone, a nurse who loved that he worked with his hands. Grandma, Tasha's oldest, asked, "Mommy says you used to deliver mail. Can you tell me about it? I'd love to." I delivered mail for 32 years. Rain or shine, I made sure people got their letters, their packages, everything they were waiting for. That sounds important. It was important. Every job is important if you do it well. Kevin's fiancée asked Mrs. Palmer, "How did you know which properties to buy?" Research. Patience. I looked for areas that were undervalued but had potential. I bought when others were afraid. I held when others sold, and I never stopped learning. "I want to learn," she said. "I've been working as a nurse for 8 years saving, but I don't know how to start investing. Come to my next workshop. I'll teach you everything I know." Later that night, after everyone left, I sat on my balcony overlooking Lake Erie. The same view I'd had for 8 years, but somehow it still took my breath away. My phone buzzed. A text from Tasha. "Mom, thank you for tonight. Thank you for teaching my kids that all work has dignity. That Grandma, the postal worker, is just as impressive as anyone with a fancy title. They adore you. We all do." I smiled and put the phone down. The journey from that retirement party to this balcony had been long and painful, and ultimately redemptive. Richard thought he was leaving a woman with nothing. Instead, he left a woman who had everything that mattered: security, respect, peace, family who finally understood. My children thought they were embarrassed by a simple postal worker. Now they told everyone about their mother, the real estate investor who taught them that strength doesn't announce itself. It just shows up day after day, building something lasting. For 32 years I sorted mail, I worked holidays, I took overtime shifts, I saved every dollar I could. And while my family was ashamed, I was building an empire. The postal uniform they mocked became the foundation of financial freedom. The job they dismissed gave me independence. The work they scorned made me a millionaire. And the best part, I did it all without their permission, their approval, or their respect. I did it for myself, because at the end of the day, the only person who needed to believe in Barbara Palmer was Barbara Palmer. And I always did. That is Barbara Palmer's story. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? What city? What country? Drop it in the comments below. I love seeing our global community come together over these stories about blue-collar workers who build empires, families who are ashamed of honest work, and the moment when a 7-year-old postal worker opened a briefcase full of property deeds at her own retirement party. Real question. If you were Barbara standing at that retirement party when your husband Richard served you divorce papers in front of everyone, while your children Tasha and Kevin cheered "best day ever," what would you have done? Would you have broken down, crying? Would you have left immediately? Or would you have done exactly what Barbara did and calmly opened a briefcase showing $2.4 million in real estate your family knew nothing about? Tell me in the comments. Hit that like button if this story made you feel something. Share it if you know someone who's been looked down on for honest work. Someone who sorted mail for 32 years while their family was embarrassed to tell people what they did. Someone who wore a postal uniform their spouse was ashamed of while secretly buying 10 rental properties. Someone who worked overtime and holidays to build wealth while their family called them unambitious. Someone who was told they were just a postal worker by the same people asking to borrow money. And subscribe for more raw, real stories about mothers who build empires in silence, husbands who divorce millionaires thinking they're taking half of nothing, children who learn respect the hard way, and what happens when a woman lets Her family thinks she has $27,800 when she really has $2.4 million. Stories about Cleveland postal workers who become real estate moguls, retirement parties that end in justice, divorce settlements that shock everyone, and blue-collar jobs that fund financial freedom. Thanks for watching. Sometimes, the woman in the postal uniform your family is ashamed of owns more property than everyone at the dinner party combined. Sometimes just a mail carrier means $15, 0 inches monthly rental income. Sometimes the best revenge is signing divorce papers with a smile and opening a briefcase full of deeds. And sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is let people underestimate her for 32 years, then show them exactly who they dismissed, disrespected, and lost. See you in the next video.